Hello and welcome back. So in the last video, we set up this consumer test file. We mocked the connection, AMQP library, our shared library, and then we created this describe with the before each and after each. Now we want to test this email consumer auth method. Okay. So what we did is inside the describe, we added this it block and we created a channel. Okay, channel contains a lot of methods, and the methods that we are using the assert exchange, assert queue, bind queue, consume. Okay, just created a jest function for those, and then I'm spying on the channel, assert exchange, assert queue, create connection, and then I'm creating a fake connection right here, and then I call this function. Now we want to assert to check if these methods are called. Okay, so to do that, we are going to say expect, okay, expect connection channel dot assert exchange. It's supposed to be connection channel assert exchange dot to have been called with. So we want to check what this is actually called with. Okay, so it should be called, we expect it to be called with this, and set the type to direct. Okay, and then we can assert as well the queue. Okay, so assert queue. Here we don't want to check if it was called with these properties, but we can check how many times it was called. So to have been called times. So how many times? It should be called at least once. Okay, or it should be called once because we are calling the function once. Okay, and then we can assert the bind queue. So we want to assert that the bind queue was called with all of these properties: the queue name, the exchange name, and the routing key. Okay, so bind queue to have been called with. Okay, the queue name. What is the queue name? This is the queue name we are using. The queue name. Okay, the exchange name and the routing key. What is the routing key? This is the routing key. Okay. Okay, so this is just what we need right here. Okay. I think I can /queues. Okay. Okay, so we are just asserting to check that this assert queue, assert exchange, bind queues, they are actually called. Now let us go ahead and run the test. Okay. Okay, to run the test is simple. We run npm run test. Okay, if you want to run a single test, it's possible. You just add the path to that test file. But here, since we have only one test, we can just run npm run test. Okay, so wait for it. It will. You can see it's detected the email consumer test file, and then here you can see our test is successful. It says consume email messages method should be called. Or you can change this, add a more descriptive, maybe should assert the queue or should create the queue or whatever you want to do. Okay, so if I do something like this, let's see what's going to happen. Okay, for the test right here. Okay, you can see that the test failed. Okay, so it expected, we passed in jobber notifications, but what was received was jobber notification. Okay, because here we set the exchange name to jobber notification. Okay, so here I can remove the test, and yeah, it's working. You can also check if this consume method was called. Okay, I will just duplicate this and I'll call this consume. Okay, and then run the test. Okay, and it should, I think it should pass. Okay, yeah, you can see that the test passed. Okay, So with this, we're able to run, add the first test. You can go ahead, duplicate this test for the other consume other email messages as well. Okay, we can do that. Let's just duplicate this test. I'll add them in their own describe blocks. Okay, so I'll call this, because this queue looks almost similar to this. Okay, so this will be consume auth order message, and then the queue name, what is the queue that we are using, is order queue. Okay, order queue. Okay, and then what else? The exchange name is jobber order, and then the routing key, this is the routing key. Okay, order email. Okay, and it's a direct exchange. Okay, so they are similar. We can run this test as well. Okay, run the test. Okay, I have an error here, and I think the error is simply because I forgot to make changes. I'm supposed to call the consume order email method. Okay, and then import this. Okay, and now let me run the test again. npm run test. Okay, so I have the test, both tests passed. Okay, they are just very simple tests, not complicated, because we are not integrating any actual, creating any actual connection or implementing actual connection to RabbitMQ. We mocked all the connections and the methods. Okay, so now we have a unit test. Like I said, we are only going to create a unit test for just one for each of the services. You can go ahead if you want, maybe create a test for the connection or mail transport, but for this course, only one test, which is the email consumer test.